Well, hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing all right. I'd like to go ahead and get started. So, Rao, are you ready for the tech update?
Yes, I am. I just added the link to Community Update 200 into the chat. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So you should be seeing my screen now with Community Update 200. On the networks, we have O12.4 running on the on all the nodes on the mainnet, and it's been going on for a few days now, and seems to be working fine. We had it on the observers earlier for several days. Basically, the updates there with the O12.4 are API updates. There is a find by block hash function. It may be mostly used by the core team right now, but we'll see in future what usage other people might get for that. But other than that, there is there is not too much of a change on the networks, except that we have the LLBM testnet now much more stable, and people have been testing it quite a bit. I want to thank and give a shout out to, in particular, a few of the community members that have been testing that out. Mr. Junfei, Linda 2878, Klinu have been actively testing out. So we could use more testing from the community, but I wanted to call out and thank these three members for their tests. NutZipper has fixed some of the bugs that they discovered in the process of the testing. And what he's doing now is extracting the code from the LLBM branch and preparing a PR for merging that into the hard fork 2 branch, because eventually what we'll get on the mainnet would be the hard fork 2 branch. So that's where we're bringing all the things together. LLBM focusing on the block merge changes, but then there are other changes from Dennis and others that are also being merged into the HF2 branch, and Tomislav and Will. So that's the activity there. So that's good news. So this basically confirms that the design changes, that the design process and the related code changes that the team went through over the last few weeks all seem to be working as expected. So that's very good news from the leaderless block merge standpoint. Now, on the leaderless block merge side, the one piece that needs to be still worked out is the block merge behavior at the time of epoch change. That seems to be relatively straightforward right now. There's probably a couple of issues to talk through and iron out. And then I think the coding, all of that should be relatively straightforward after that. And, you know, again, like we did with the block merge itself before, there may be a couple of cases that need to be worked through by hand to make sure that everything behaves as expected at epoch change. And then, of course, we'll do the code changes and then test that out. So that's the other piece that needs to be done on the block merge side. So again, I would request everybody in the community to test LLBM testnet as much as possible, because the more issues we discover earlier in the cycle, the better for code quality and for the release cycle. So please do whatever you can there. Tomislav has been spending a lot of time on these design changes, as well as generally leading and mentoring the team and the new developers through their tasks and creating the tasks so that they can accelerate their learning. And yet there is incremental delivery that is useful and immediate for the immediately relevant tasks. So there's a lot of work that's being done there. He will be completing his Rev double spend on the Revs, because he had been working on the accelerated Rev transfers. there is a little piece of that he needs to work on that is still on his backlog at this point in time. Dennis is making great progress implementing his new code with in the import-export of the DAG, so history data in particular. So he did a presentation today to the core team about a couple of different options of how he wants to go about that, and they decided on what is the right way to do that, and he will be integrating that into he'll be implementing and integrating that into the hard fork 2 branch. And then we may have a little presentation about that choice at some later in one of the later debrief sessions. Stas is coming along very nicely with learning about the code base and the API, and he's working backwards from the API with Tomislav's guidance to see how things work. And he has changed the history reset method to return the value in F-type. And this is something that's needed by the code elsewhere. So this is one of the inside changes that'll help him get familiar with the code. And then he has also been working on a bunch of developer experience-oriented tasks. For example, he completed the API API calls to add network ID and short name in the API response. And he and Tomislav have been helping to onboard Martin, who is new to RChain and is trying to complete the RChat work. In particular, the second part of the RChat work. Dan Conley has taken messages from Zulip chat and was able to get them over to the chain in his work. And what Martin is trying to do is he's trying to take the messages from the chain and then putting them in a different Zulip instance from the original one to demonstrate that you can federate existing applications or decentralize and federate existing applications through the process. So that's the piece that he is working on. Plus having that entire RChain cycle complete will act as a demo for us to demonstrate other functionalities. For example, you may be able to tokenize the participation in the channels and things like that. So there is that side of it is the reason why we're focused on that, to both demonstrate how existing applications can be brought easily onto the RChain and have a pattern and a code sample to do that, as well as maybe directly use this work in some commercializable fashion. So that's the activity there. And Stas and Tomislav, and in particular, Tomislav is going to package that because, as probably community members know, to get our node going in the and especially to get it going in this kind of an environment where you have to integrate with a couple of other pieces is a little difficult for somebody that's new to the network. So Tomislav is packaging that so that it's kind of easy to start and set up your own instance and get going with that. So that's the activity going on. The other thing in improving developer experience, Will has added a couple more calls to the runtime API, get continuation at parse and get data at par. And there's an issue in there that Tomislav has created for all the planned API changes that we'll be doing. Like I said in the last call, at this time, we're only adding new things to the API, so nothing should break or there should not be any issues with existing code. But people that are developing on RChain might want to keep tabs on what new functionality is available in the APIs. At some point, we might version the API into a new version, and then that might change the URL that you need to use for the API. But that's about all that is likely to change at this time. nothing other than that, unless you want to use the new calls, which we hope you do, which is the reason why we're doing that. So that's, I think that covers most of what happened this week on the developer experience side of the things. Once LLBM tasks are complete, obviously our next focus is to get decentralization and external validators, or getting ready for decentralization and external validators. Is one stream of work that we'll be doing. The other stream of work is working with enterprise customers to be able to set them up to be successful, their integration teams and their architects and any developers that they are engaging with, to give them the patterns, give them the documentation, give them the tools so that they can get going with deploying RChain in enterprise environments in a successful manner. So one of the things that kind of came sort of in that conversation about the developer experience is to say, let's see if we can accelerate delivery of Rholang 1.1 so that new devs can just start Rholang 1.1 as the base and then build from there. So that's another piece of work you will see in the code base that Stas has updated the Rholang 1.1 branch with the latest code from the dev branch. And I think there was one test failing which Will has fixed. And so it's all now fine. It's in the dev branch at this point in time. But our goal is to try and release that along with hard fork 2 based on the feedback we got from the community. So that's the plan at this point in time. I think those are my main updates from a tech standpoint. Please do go ahead, test these. And if you want to try out, for example, the Rholang 1.1 branch or something, feel free to do that. And there was a request to kind of make available the translator from Rholang 1.1 to Rholang 1.0 as something independent that people could play with. So we're looking into that also. So that's what I have. Any questions, comments on any of this? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Rao. Let's see. There was mostly informational discussion at the board meeting. There was no vote or resolution, so nothing to update with respect to the board. We did have we had a chance to speak with for the educational series for the IBM blockchain development group, and that was very well received. The audience stayed and continued to ask questions for another 40 minutes past the time slot. And ultimately, I had to get to another meeting. Otherwise, I think they would have kept going. So it was very well received. And we also spoke with at length with one of the largest systems integrators this week, and I'll speak to some of the content of that in a little bit. But first, I wanted to see if Daryl, are you ready for the week in review?
Yes, I'm ready. So here's my week in review for Thursday, November 25th to today, December 1st. Last Thursday, the governance committee call was more of an informal Thanksgiving discussion. Co-op member Yvonne Golub joined the call. In the work study, sharing capabilities in Rholang. Friday, we didn't have an RCast due to Thanksgiving. And on Saturday, they did robot.net website development. On Monday in the Casper stand-up, Thomas Love gave a presentation of his work to capture the calculation of the finalization fringe and conflict set for block merge. And in the RDOV member co-op planning group, they did some crowdfunding planning. Yesterday in the communications working group, we discussed integrating Edify content and getting going with a newsletter cadence. Also discussed integrating real-time translations for our Zoom calls. Also yesterday in the DApp developer work study, they did website development and discussion of robot.net shard token economics. This morning in the RChain active member hangout, Theo demoed the latest improvements to the RChain publishing proof of concept. Theo also showed some tinkering he's been doing with the RGov website lately using Astro, and he suggested using Astro framework for the RChain.coop website. Raphael published first iteration of the reserved list of domain names and explained his go-to-market strategy for DAPI. And David Asamanye talked about a command line toolkit for building dApps on RChain to make dApp development a lot easier. And Jim, it was an active call. And Jim also talked about the community network shard for Robot. And that brings us to now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions for Daryl? All right. Up and coming. We have RChain will be presenting this weekend at the Foresight Institute's Vision Weekend. Recommend taking a look at the Foresight Institute guest list for the Vision Weekend. It's pretty much a bunch of luminaries from the tech industry, and in particular from Silicon Valley. So please take a look at that and you'll see why it's important for us to be engaged in that. And then Steve Henley is on his way to Art Basel in Miami. Art Basel is one of the largest art conferences. There's one in Italy, I believe, which is where it started, and then there's a sister version of it in Miami.
It might be Art Basel. I know that's not really part of the point, but
okay. Different people have pronounced it differently.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, keep going. Yeah.
All right.
You say Basel and I say Basel.
Indeed. So Steve will be participating in a panel discussion. The panelists include Princess Alessandra von Bismarck, as well as Brock Pierce and other luminaries in the blockchain space. So it'll be great to have RChain representation. And then Steve has a number of other meetings with folks associated with the conference. So this is another big step for RChain. So any questions about this marketing and fundraising engagements? We'll give more details about the fundraising side in the closed door session. Theo, are you at a point where you want to give a demo today or no?
No, sorry. I was too busy getting proof of concept up and running, so I haven't worked on the file system version of the POC. Okay. But it will probably be next week.
Perfect. That'll be great.
I have a little anecdote. I have a little observation to make about RPC and self-sovereign data that I think might be useful in this particular briefing to mention. So today on BBC Radio 4, I'll paste the link. I think you can hear Radio 4. So I've pasted the link in the chat. This is the Reith Lectures. The Reith Lectures are very famous. Lord Reith established them. And great scientists and visionaries are asked to give a lecture, usually in 3 or 4 parts, on the BBC Radio 4, which is the premier radio channel for the British Broadcasting Company, and Professor Stuart Russell at OBE, who's a British computer scientist, known for his contributions specifically in artificial intelligence, is talking about AI and its impact. And his affiliation is University of California, Berkeley. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And the reason I'm mentioning that is also this week on what's called the Today programme on Radio 4, a guy known as C. Those of you that have watched James Bond will have seen Q. And, of course, Judi Dench died in one of the previous episodes as the head of MI5, whatever it is. And C, the guy that actually is the head of the Secret Service in the UK, was on the Today programme talking about the rise and the importance of artificial intelligence, in particular, how artificial intelligence is being used by agents and states to do things that perhaps many of us here would not necessarily approve of. With Professor Russell doing his piece on artificial intelligence, it's quite interesting to reflect on artificial intelligence and its rise, because when you look at the rise, it coincides very much so. The rise of AI coincides with something that's happened in our industry and in the world in general that Daryl often talks about, which is, the stealing of our data. And the rise has been directly proportional to the availability of large data sets. Prior to the cloud, the data sets were not available. And so artificial intelligence was largely confined to sort of backwaters and very, very small applications. But now, as we know today, when we're on Facebook and other things, it's all over the place. And that's largely to do with the rise of the availability of data. And the reason that's important, and I think Professor Russell in his lectures may well touch upon this, and I know that Tim Berners-Lee actually collaborated in his lectures too, it's to do with the self-sovereignty of data. The only way to combat the rise of artificial intelligence is to starve it of its leavened bread. And its leavened bread is our data. And that alone is why self-sovereign data is so critically important, and why RPC, RChain Publishing Cooperative, is so important upon an amazing blockchain platform that allows us to store the most important data that we want to hold dear to us securely and under our own self-sovereign control. And I just wanted to share that thought with you guys.
Lovely. No, thank you. It's a very, very timely discussion. I very much appreciate that. On that note, I think Theo has put in the chat the early days proof of concept for people to play with. I will say that I have had several artists. I've been engaged with several artists who are quite interested in using the platform for publishing their work as NFTs. And so hopefully we'll be getting a user group together and or engaging these artists in other forms of dialogues. Some of them are quite reclusive, and user groups might be anathema to their working process. But I do believe that they want to talk with us about how the platform could be made more usable to them. So this is exciting development. Any questions about that or Steve's points?
I think there's one offer that I'd like to make sort of a bit more publicly, although I don't think we'll do it in a more open session. And that is that for those of you that are interested in understanding what the vision for RPC is and how we are trying to attract investment that will benefit both the RChain co-op and enable us to achieve that vision of self-sovereignty of data on top of the RChain blockchain, we would very much like to invite members of the cooperative to a session, which will be not recorded. So it will be an unrecorded session. I think it was Daryl that suggested we do it unrecorded. I think he's absolutely right. Because we're going through a round of potential investment and we want to keep it off the web, as it were. But we would really, really appreciate the opportunity to present all that we've done, the demo included, in the context of a pitch deck, and get your feedback. As Jim Whitescarver always tells me, the collective intelligence is much bigger than the sum of its parts, and we really appreciate that collective intelligence being brought to bear to see if we can make it even better.
Yeah, I agree. Community engagement will be quite valuable, for sure. So as a part of our discussions with potential enterprise partners, I put together on the fly this little one-pager for how to do an RChain enterprise DApp. Essentially gives you what we're doing on the top, what we're doing with Zulip, which is a template for a data bus kind of application. So as we've mentioned many times before, Zulip instances live on their own. They don't connect with each other. So if you need to talk to a community via Zulip, you need to know the name of the server. What Dan Connolly has done is to add some triggers to the Postgres database that's used by Zulip to store the chat data. And so when those updates are called, the RChain store is also updated, right? So some Rholang is generated, which grabs the data and stores it on chain. And what the Ficus group are doing is to take an RChain instance that has Zulip data on chain, and to grab it from the chain, put it back into Postgres so that a different Zulip chat can see that data. Now, the end result is not going to be yet a real-time federated chat application, but it will be demonstrative of how you do these kind of data bus style applications. And through iteration, we can get all the design warts sorted out so that it could become a real-time thing. But mainly the purpose is to provide a sample application so that people can see what it's like to take an off-the-shelf application and to federate it. If you want to then do the next step up in terms of real-time data input, the natural thing to do is, so you want to treat one of, what I'm taking is this box here, and I'm exploding it in terms of pieces that would be better suited to high throughput data feeds. So this is some external data source. It could be an external database. It could be a large user base that's generating millions of client requests. Whatever it is, it's some external data feed. You want to put some kind of queuing capability, for example, Rabbit. It could be an AMQP provider like Rabbit or one of these other capabilities. But the main point is that from the perspective of any party that is attempting to put in a client request, it appears as if the server is immediately responsive. There's no wait. There's an immediate acknowledgement, got your data, be back in a while. And then you can have an external data pump, which is processing the queue, and it can do so concurrently. So for example, if you were uploading a bunch of videos, right? So imagine that you had a bunch of videos to process. If you were attempting to do something like that with Ethereum, then Ethereum will be sequential. And so this pump can only take one video at a time. And so if the average video length is, let's say, a terabyte, or no, I don't know, let's say 10 gigabytes, then you would have the upload time of 10 gigabytes times n, where n is the number of videos, before you uploaded everything. Whereas with RChain, this data pump can process these all at the same time. And because it can process them all at the same time, what you'll get is just the upload time will be the upload time it takes to upload a single one of them. which is, you know, the upload time of 10 gigabytes as opposed to n times 10 gigabytes. So that's that part. Now, if you want to compare this to what Kayvon was doing with respect to Kubernetes, he was essentially keeping RChain inside another box, and then Kubernetes was managing a bunch of RChain instances, RChain node instances, so that if any one of them failed, there would be another one to take its place right away. So this composes with Kayvon's solution. And then finally, let's imagine that you have some special purpose algorithm that is working off of the externally provided data, right? So then that would be a Rholang program, or it could be a Rholang program or a Scala program, depending on performance requirements. But in the case of the Rholang situation, you're going to go to the channels where the external data eventually resides, and just use the for comprehension to go and grab the data that you want and then run your special purpose algorithm. And that special purpose algorithm, for example, if it's coded in any JVM language or is linked using the JNI via any of the C languages, then that can be running in process as a part of the node. So that gives us basically the building blocks to build high performance, high throughput kinds of data applications. And so walking through this with these systems integrators, they were very appreciative of this kind of breakdown. And then you know, everyone here, I'm sure, is aware of it, but you can do Rholang in a nutshell, right? So this is the core of Rholang right here, and then here are, you know, two important examples. For example, here's Hello World, and this is what it takes to link up a server that's offering sales with a client that wants to do a purchase, right? So this Rholang code talks about how to link up sales and purchases. So that's the whole thing in a single page, which is sort of the very much at the heart of RChain, is trying to keep everything so simple that you can fit the key ideas on a single page, and just about anybody who's in the tech world can grasp and understand it. Any questions?
Yeah, Greg, could you do one favor for me?
Sure.
So in the Rholang expression that you have with the buy, the purchase, yeah, the one at the bottom, one at the bottom actually. Yeah. So the long one, sales process and purchase process. Mm-hmm. Can you read that out in what would be your American narrative?
Oh, sure. No worries. So basically, you need the server to create a special channel for talking specifically to this client, right? So it has a public channel, my local shard, where it's waiting for initial client requests, and then it's expecting that client request is going to send a place to go and talk to the client. But it also wants to send a private place for the client to talk to the server, so that it can distinguish this client from all other clients. And then on receipt, basically on successful transmission. So this is the hookup with respect to the server. So once the hookup has happened, then you initiate the sales process with the two private channels. And effectively, the client is running the dual of that, right? So while the server is listening on some public channel, the client is sending on some public channel. And what is it sending? Well, it's sending a fresh address where the server can talk specifically to this client. And so, having received the server channel, then the purchase process is now equipped to engage with Y and Z. So if you run this, in 2 steps, so the first step is on my local shard, Y will be received here, and then on Y we'll send X, right? So then sales purchase so on the first step we'll set up to send X on Y, and then here we're waiting for something on Y, which will be X, and the X will be bound to Z, and so you'll get under the 2 new scopes. Oops, this one is typo. That's gone. So under the 2 new scopes, you'll get the sales process hooked up to the purchase process. So they're parameterized in terms of the two things. So server listens for the client request, client sends the client request, and then listens for the server response, and that hooks up the sale and the purchase process.
Perfect. I'd love to say that I said that deliberately because I could see there was a bug in the code.
Yeah,
but I can't claim that.
awesome.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. All right. Any other questions, comments? This is the community's time to also feedback to the co-op. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Please stay safe, stay warm, and we will see you on the other side.